Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In this week's episode, we're talking about an art buying consultant who built up a seven-figure business through Instagram. After graduating from Harvard Law School in the early 2000s, Maria Brito was poised to have a successful career as a corporate lawyer. There was just one catch: she hated practicing corporate law. Instead, her true passion was art. Throughout the early 2000s, she started visiting New York galleries and even started to recommend pieces for purchase to her friends. Eventually, it dawned on her that high net worth individuals would pay her for the recommendations that she was giving out for free. In 2009, Maria quit her law firm job and launched a new career as an art buying consultant. She also invested a significant portion of her time into creating online content, first with a blog and then later on social media. She eventually grew her audience to over 200,000 followers across Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and email, and she's leveraged this audience to sign book deals, run brand sponsorship campaigns, and bring in dozens of wealthy clients that include Gwyneth Paltrow and Sean Diddy Combs. In a recent interview, she explained to me her content creation process, her philosophy on Instagram sponsorship deals, and why so many high net worth individuals trust her to buy art for their collections, often after seeing only a static iPhone photo of the piece she's recommending for purchase. Before we jump into the interview, I want to talk about my newsletter. It currently has thousands of subscribers across technology and media. Seriously, name any major tech or media company, whether it's Google, Facebook, or the New York Times, and I guarantee you that several of its top executives are signed up for my newsletter. If you're not subscribed, then you're missing out. Go to simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, on to my interview with Maria. Hey, Maria, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Simon. I'm very happy to be here with you today.
So we're going to be talking about this amazing career that you've built, but let's talk a little bit about what happened before. Before you entered the art world, you had a completely different career. What was it?
I was a very miserable corporate attorney in big law firms in New York City.
And so while you were in this miserable job that you didn't like, you started getting not only interested in the art market, but possibly a career in art. How did you first start getting interested in art?
Well, it started actually when I was really young because I grew up in Venezuela in a very conservative family, and they thought that anything that was artistic was something you do to nurture yourself, to expand your horizons, and to be cultivated, but not necessarily a career. But I was lucky that I was exposed to art in many different ways since I was a child. But my parents thought that the only way was for me to be an attorney or a doctor or an engineer. And so that's what I did. And when I moved to New York City in year 2000, after graduating from law school, I started going to galleries and collecting art, very, very emerging artists or things like that. And as I grew more interested in the field, because I thought it was fascinating, I started also recommending art to some friends and things like that. And it was very interesting to see my friends calling me or emailing me and saying, the artist that you recommended me is getting hot, or we can see that the prices are going up and that artist is having museum shows and this and that. So it was a lot of confirmations and little clues that I was picking up that, first of all, I needed to change careers because, again, I hated it and I was so depressed and felt that I had no meaning or purpose in that job. And I also saw an opportunity to enter a field that was it was really in need of people with a lot more ideas that brought a more democratic spin to the art world, not to cheapen it, but to actually invite more people to the conversation and demystify it. Back then, when I started my company 13 years ago, everything was very obscure and nobody really would go that much to all the galleries. And of course, there was no Instagram, which absolutely changed the game for everybody. But the only two forms of social media that people used the most back then were Facebook and Twitter. And obviously, blogging was also a thing. And I thought, well, why don't I actually take this mediums and connect with other people and start doing something that nobody else as an art advisor is doing, which is writing about the artist, writing about shows, and doing it in a language that is like fifth grade, that everybody can understand without having to cover the art or the artist in all this strange halo of sanctity, because the truth is artists are normal people like you and I. And you have to kind of like put things into context. Nobody was doing it. And I saw this as an opportunity for me to kind of be a trailblazer in a space where nobody was. And so this is how it started.
So did you start blogging when you were still an attorney, or that was after?
No, it was literally after that I started blogging, because I thought it was a perfect companion for an unknown person, completely unknown. And I also did it for my own education, because obviously putting ideas in writing and inviting others to read what you are doing is an invitation to your world and your ideas, but it was also part of how do I actually make sense of what I'm doing, even though I'm so not from this business. I am literally learning on the go. So that was the perfect link for me to build up the audience, but also try to make sense and educate myself even more. And after a couple of years, I started inviting artists to participate of this roundups and things like that I would go to their studios. I would bring a photographer. So it was studio visits, and we were opening the studios of this artist to my audience. And that also was incredibly successful, because I did it with the intent of connecting with the artist, but also it was my taste. So it started becoming a thing that artists wanted to be part of this project, because I would write well. I would have a photographer who, capture their studios in the best possible light. And I will also distribute it like crazy, because I was building up all these things on social media that, I was doing it before anybody else.
So when did you quit your law job in 2009?
Yes, yes, because my child was born in 2008, and I went back to the law firm after maternity leave. And then in January, when they paid the bonuses, and it was like a mess. It was the aftermath of Bear Stearns and Lehman and all those things. And I quit. Yes, I quit in 2009.
And so your initial clients, this was before you launched the blog, were just people you had met naturally through being a high-powered lawyer, right?
No, actually, my first clients were people that actually referrals from those friends that I told you that I had been advising informally without charging or anything. And I also hired this was very strange, but it was a Russian guy who was like an SEO expert at the time. I don't even know how I found that guy. And there was a lot of SEO and I don't even have that platform website anymore. But some people came through Googling like art advisor, accessible art advisor in New York City, things like that. So technology has definitely been a very important part of my career and how I've built this business.
And can you explain for my audience how art consulting works? Like, what's your business relationship to your clients, and what's the kind of dynamic there?
Yeah, what I do is I am the eyes and ears of all those clients who want to live with art, want to have an art collection, and they don't have the time to go to. Only New York alone has more than 1,000 galleries, and the global business of art is a $50 billion business, and that includes galleries, it includes art fairs, it includes auction houses. And so my clients want me to tell them what is that actually it's important right now to know about artists. They also want me to get things that the people don't necessarily have easy access to. And they also want me to filter all this humongous amount of information that is out in the world, because they want to make sure that they are acquiring artists whose value, either will increase or it will be retained, because nobody really wants to just throw money at decorative things. And so that's where I come in to make sure that I sift through this, mountain of information daily that I get in my inbox. And I also help them curate and rotate what they have. At some point, some clients have 2,000 paintings, right? And most of them live on a storage because they don't have enough walls, no matter how many houses they have. And so my job is to make sure that every time they want to rotate, things are accessible, that the collection is coherent, that it makes sense, that the pieces talk to each other in a nice way. And it's just a wonderful thing. And I work really with people who are just starting and people who, as I said before, have 2,000 paintings. So I don't have any sort of like criteria of, I won't work with you because you're just getting started. No, I actually love to be able to shape collections from the get-go. And so that's very fun.
And so the remit is that they either a wealthy person or a corporation, because these corporations sometimes collect art for their walls and stuff like that. They come to you and say, hey, we need someone to tell us who the hot and upcoming artists are and arrange for us to, be the middleman to not only introduce us to the art, but also buy it for us. Is that kind of, and like you're saying, this is an up and coming artist. This piece is worth 10,000. I think it's going to be worth way more than that 5 years from now or something like that.
It's a little bit, a bit like what you said. There is also private commissions that corporations are usually requesting, which is, if a bank has a specific target in mind, or the mission is connected to a certain cause, and then there is an artist who represents that, I go and find that for them or suggest a few things, and then I watch and manage the project from the beginning until the end. So it's a specific commission that will belong to that particular corporation because it was done just for them. I also do a lot of consulting for retail companies that want to partner with artists to produce a limited edition capsule collection, and they don't know how to do it. Because, to be honest with you, working with artists is as hard as working with people in Hollywood. And I love them, and I have learned how to deal with them, and they're wonderful people, but it's not easy. So there are a lot of nuances that people in corporations don't know. And that even includes large projects, like, for example, painting a mural in Brooklyn, or creating a design for the windows of one of their flagship stores and things like that. So there are a lot of different things that I do. Not every art advisor covers everything, but I like to be in a variety of different spaces because it's all about being creative, and I am in that space.
And is it like a flat fee you charge, or is it a commission, like a percentage based on the price of the artwork?
It's almost always a percentage, and I represent the artist. Sorry, I represent the client. So in most cases, I negotiate a special discount, or it's the access, and that's the new thing that we have been seeing in the art market for the past I think in 3 years ago, it got really intensified, but we've been seeing this for the past 5 years, that the access is so incredibly hard because there are a certain amount of young artists who are doing really well. They are very hot, and there is only so much that they are making, right? I mean, it takes a certain amount of time to make a painting, and it goes to a dealer or a gallery, and the gallery has to decide who's the best person for those paintings. So that access is becoming more and more restricted because of the reasons I told you, because of a supply-demand issue. And also, it's becoming for me more and more being the person who grants access to what's possible. And in certain cases, because these artists are so hot, the galleries are not even granting discounts. So then the client has to pay a percentage, which is typically 10%. And I get them access to all these things because I've had relationships with these galleries for over 13 years. And also because I'm good to them in the sense that you don't want to just present clients who end up flipping at auction just to make a profit, because then you are on a blacklist forever. And so we've got to be very careful. I have to be very careful vetting my clients too. I mean, I do take young people, or even inexperienced people, regardless of their age, but I have to make sure that I understand what their objectives are, because gaining financial value is one thing that every investor wants, but also speculating and flipping art is not something that I subscribe to. And I make that very clear to all my clients.
And so you eventually launched this blog, and we'll talk about just that for now. We'll get into the social media stuff a little later. What did that blog look like in terms of the kind of like how much content were you creating, and what did that content look like?
Well, my first blog was hosted on Blogger, so you can imagine it looked horrendous because this is what was available. We had an option to do WordPress that required a lot of coding, and I just did not have the time or inclination to learn how to code. And then there was Blogger that was a little bit more user-friendly, so you just had to write the text, choose a template, and upload the pictures. So I would post maybe once a week, and it was about the art fairs that I did go, like at the time. For example, I went to Art Basel in Miami Beach, so I put iPhone pictures or whatever pictures I had that this is what I liked, and I wrote kind of like a short statement or a short summary of what I liked the best in that fair and why. And so that's how it started. And maybe 1 week I would interview an artist on the phone, because I was still not going to the studios and visiting them. And I would take or ask for permission that the artist would allow me to post some of the pictures of the art, and I would transcribe and edit the interview. So it was a combination of interviews and also exhibitions that I'd visit in New York City and say, wow, this really is worth your while. If you're in New York, stop by this exhibition, look at this images that I took with my phone. And it was a once a week thing, and I would just promote it on Facebook and Twitter to gain more traffic, basically.
And how long did it take before you started looking at your analytics and be like, wow, there's actually an audience that's coming back for this?
I think that I was paying attention to the analytics from the beginning, because I had paid this guy, the Russian guy, for the SEO. So I was paying attention to all those things, even though the SEO was not for the blog was connected to the main website, so I could actually pay attention to it. And, it was a gradual increase, but I think that what really caused an impression on me was getting messages and emails and comments at that time, comments on the actual Facebook posts of either the galleries who represented these artists or other artists. So I saw that there was, and certain times it was collectors. So, but I saw that there was a quality of people who would read everything and then they would share it again. And that gave me a lot of impetus, because I felt, well, if these people who read, super complicated publications like, Art Forum, that at that time they were written in like gibberish, like all these ridiculous terms that people used to use to describe art and whatnot. So there's people who are used to all that snobbery are actually sharing my content and talking about it. It's because they are resonating with it. So I must be doing something right. It was not that much about the traffic. It was about the people who were really important and influential and had a lot of experience, much more experience than I had, given that I had no experience, who were responding really well to my posts.
Yeah. And for you, like, because your business model was based on, these individual clients, like if you had 10,000 page views on an article, that wouldn't really do anything for you. What you wanted to find that one person who had, a large amount of money to spend and who would reach out and become a client, right?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's, it was obviously a combination of word of mouth and referrals, but it was very good for me to be on the nice, side of all these other people, because as I'm explaining to you, like right now, access is everything. So if I wouldn't have built all those relationships at that time where I was writing about this artist and writing about the galleries and writing about the art fairs in an elevated way, but that was easy to understand, I would have had a harder time getting through all the BS that surrounds so many of these things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have that with my own business in the sense of like my interviews on my podcast, my newsletter. It eventually led to like a positive feedback loop where I don't even have to go out and find people to interview anymore. They all come to me because because they hear an interview with someone else, they want to be interviewed. And it basically opened up a lot of access to people I wouldn't have had access to if I was just cold emailing them. So I'm guessing it's the same for you. So you had some early success with Facebook and Twitter. I think you have like 11,000 followers on Twitter, something like 20,000 on Facebook. But where you really became a star is Instagram. I think you have close to 200,000 followers on there. How did you start getting serious about Instagram?
Well, Instagram, I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, is 11 years old. And when Instagram came 11 years ago, I wasn't even sure I wanted to join because it's so funny. I think you would laugh at this, but I was thinking in my mind and actually saying out loud, oh my God, I already have Facebook and Twitter and a blog. I don't need Instagram, right? It's hilarious. But a friend of mine had convinced me and she said, look, Instagram is the platform where all the artists are and you cannot not be there. And all you need to do is to have a phone that takes pictures and you already have an iPhone because that's all there is. You need to be there. It's a very important platform. So I did. Just because in 2013, and that's when I joined, I think it was at the end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013, because I had just written and published. The book came in 2013, but this was a coffee table book that came to me. Funny enough, because I had written a blog post for Gwyneth Paltrow for Goop when it was just a once a week green background newsletter. And obviously that did everything for me because it's not right now Goop is a huge company and the website is huge and the newsletter comes, 3 times a week or whatever, and is filled with a bunch of links. But this was just when it was not a company as huge. It was just Gwyneth and an assistant. So that when that came out, it got me an enormous amount of attention and visibility.
To your Instagram?
No, to me. And because of that, I am just telling you why I decided to open Instagram. And because of that, I got a publishing house in New York to call me up and say, we love how you write. We love the connections that you make. We love that you take all these fun pictures with your phone. Do you want to make a book with us? And I said almost yes right away because I was so new still to the business and I needed something else that would in somewhat cement what I was already doing. And because of Instagram, I decided to join Instagram so that I could promote the book on Instagram and get more sales and, and things like that. So that was the reason why I joined Instagram. And that was 2013, early 2013.
And how did you become so big on Instagram?
I think it was a combination of consistency, using beautiful pictures, being out there in the world every day, seeing art shows. I also had a lot of people coming after me when the book came out. It was in the New York Times. It was in Vogue. And so that was the time where social media, all these accounts would actually promote you too. So if you had an article with them, they would put you on their Instagram, they would tag you. And that was a much smaller Instagram we're talking about that long ago, right? It was a very different place. So when you were promoted by these other accounts, people would follow you in thousands and 2,000 and 3,000 people. Nowadays, nobody follows back, even if you are in the biggest account, because it's so diluted, right? And saturated. So I think it was partially a lot of that kind of promotions with others. I think it was the consistency of my posts, which were daily and they were beautiful. And I took care of, editing the pictures the best possible way I could. And and sharing what was happening in all these galleries in New York City, which nobody really was doing that much. And then also I kept working on visiting the artist studios and promoting that. And so the artists would promote. So it was a lot of cross promotions that actually allowed the growth to happen on Instagram. And when they allowed video, then I went on to video. And when they added the stories, we played with the stories. And now they have the reels. I'm playing with the reels. It's a very different world right now. I think Instagram is a very difficult and complicated platform, that it was not to be like that. But it's expected that they need to evolve and they need to change, and they need to compete with YouTube, and they need to compete with TikTok. So it's different, but it still is a very, very important platform for me.
And you hinted at this before, but eventually you went from purely word of mouth referrals to suddenly you started getting basically cold referrals from your online content. How does that work? Is it like someone just slipping into your DMs and asking about your rates or how does that relationship start?
It was just exactly like that. When Instagram instituted or launched the DMs, I started getting messages from art collectors from several places around the world saying, wow, I really love your eye. I love that you are on everything, and artists that you discover become famous. Because that's the thing. A lot of people just find or used to find artists through my posts and then go to them and offer them solo shows or buy their work directly and things like that. So I was and I still am taking as a reference for many of these things, and people pay really close attention when I discover a new artist. And so I did get several DMs from big collectors saying, I would love to work with you on some of like all these young artists or emerging artists, and how do you work, and would you be, in some of these cases, I even got invited to fly out of the country and, work with these people in continents, even away, because they liked what I was doing, and they saw I was legit and I had a real website, and things like that. So yes, and that continues to happen. Although I'm not sure if but there are so many controls nowadays with the DMs that you have to dig deeply and move a lot of things so that you get them, because Instagram has intensified the amount of filters and controls. So another Instagram interesting change, that it's making DMs a little bit more difficult to get to you. So yes, that's the answer, is that the DMs have worked tremendously well for me.
And I'm sure like one of the appeals of working with you is not just about your expertise, is in the sense of like rich people are drawn to celebrity, so they're drawn to buying art from celebrity artists, but like you were a celebrity within the art world and yourself, and probably that that was kind of scintillating in terms of like having this famous person within this very I'm looking for a correct word, but this world that is very insular. Like you were kind of like a celebrity within it, and that probably increased the appeal of working with you for clients.
I don't know if I don't see myself as a celebrity. I see myself as the person who works really hard and takes really good care of myself and my clients. And I think that those are values that belong to me. I don't look the way I look because I think I'm a celebrity. I look the way I look because it's good for me to work out every day and to dress well. And I do those things for myself. But I believe that, a lot of collectors are very smart and very savvy, and they don't need to work with me. They can work alone, or they have a different art advisors. But I know that the clients that I have usually stay with me for many years. Some of them have been with me for 10 years. And I think that, yes, it's an insular world. It's complicated. And I think that the biggest draw of working with me is that I really am on top of things, and I work hard, and I have the relationships in place, and I'm serious, and the galleries like working with me, the clients like working with me, and it's not just the facade of what people can see on social media. There is a lot of work that goes into what I'm doing and what I consistently do, because as I said before, the market became extremely competitive, and I have to serve my clients in the best possible way.
With any kind of client services, there's only so far you can scale, because there's only so many hours a day you can work and so many clients that you could personally service. It seems like you've thought about ways to scale your online reach a little bit with different products? Like, for instance, let's talk about you eventually launched an online course. What was the subject of that course?
Yes, the online course is creativity for business people, but it also applies to anybody who is an artist or a freelancer or a manager in a business and anybody who's feeling stuck. And what's the premise? Why do you need creativity? You need creativity to stand out, to outshine your competitors, to come up with relevancy and novelty in a world that, as you know, it changes every 2 months. We have a different world and we have to pivot, because you want to make some noise in the world with your products and your services. So I sought out to somewhat design a curriculum that was based on both the way I built my business and all the many different streams of revenues, because I've worked with product collaborations as well. As I told you, I work with companies. I still consult for retail. Have my bread and butter, which comes from the consulting, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to give that to my students, as well as showing them what are the most important things that I have learned from successful artists. And just for context, I think a lot of people have this misconception that artists are poor and the starving artists. The truth of the matter is most of the artists I work with make seven figures, and there has never been this much power and wealth in the hands of artists as it is today, because the appetite of the market and the size of the market has just blown up in ways that I never, even as a visionary that I started in this business when people were not really doing it, I never thought it was going to get as big and as monstrous, and the demand was going to be so intense. So I sought out to put in this program not only my experience, but all the things I learned from the best artists that I have worked with, and give that in a practical way, no theory, just practical way to my students in short videos that are part of core modules. There are PDFs, there are exercises, and once a month there is a weekly call. So originally this course was being launched every 6 months, but that was too much work for me. And what I did is that I evergreened it, and I made the format differently, in the sense that I can't be with people once a week on Zoom calls for 1 hour or 2 hours. That's impossible for me in terms of time and energy. And also, I think it's that right now is very, in a way, self-paced. It's always been, but it's self-paced in the sense that you join today, you have all the time to just go over the materials. You are not in a rush, and you come to the calls if you want. And if you don't want, you send, a question and I'll answer. And so the point of the course is to teach people how to think creatively, no matter what their profession is, and to help them materialize the ideas, because, there are millions of ideas and people come with ideas all the time. The problem is people do not execute them. So this course gives them the tools to know how to execute those ideas and to go out in the world and create a new product, create a new business, or flip around the business that they have that is, stalling or not necessarily bring in the revenue that they were supposed to see, and things like that. So it's been a very humbling experience, because I love working with these entrepreneurs and artists, and sometimes I've gotten doctors and lawyers too, and also see if I can make a difference in their lives with what I have learned and improve their pain points a little bit. I think that, and sometimes a lot, because a lot of them get really incredible results when they actually commit to doing the work. And I think that it's been one of the most fulfilling things I've done, besides everything else, but this is particularly humbling and fulfilling.
And it's passive revenue because anybody can just, purchase the course and start taking it in their own time whenever they want.
Absolutely. It's
Uh-huh.
there for the taking. Yep.
How much do you charge for the course?
Right now it's $297. It used to be $497 when I was launching it and having this intense 4 weeks of Zoom calls every Wednesday or whatever for 2 hours. So it required a lot more of my time. So since I evergreened it, now people just can come and just, it's like about half the price what it used to be.
Do you do sponsorship deals for your social media?
Sometimes, yes. It
Uh-huh.
depends on, yeah. I mean, I don't go with everything. I get emails every day and of people who would want me to promote anything and everything and their agencies and whatnot. And I'm not interested. I don't really care, to make $1,000 out of a dress that I don't believe in. But I did a really nice partnership last year with Lavazza Coffee because it was a 12-month partnership. And originally, when I signed the contract, I was going to go to Italy with them, and I was going to go and work with them through Art Basel and the US Open. And then the pandemic hit, and they honor the contract, and I just had to create content in and out, like my apartment or with my kids or in New York. But I really loved working with them. And I have done a few deals with other brands that are meaningful to me and that I really like. I did one recently also with PBS they launched a show about the Met and when the Met closed because of the pandemic. So I did that as well. So it's got to be something that I believe in, that I care about, and that I feel 100% qualified to bring the message,
Yeah, but because that's not your main monetization, it's much easier for you to say no than your average, Instagram influencer.
Of course, it's not. I mean, I don't live off of Instagram. It's very nice when somebody comes and say, do you want $24,000 to be with us for 1 year, right? I mean, I'll be stupid to say no to that, right? Unless it's something that it has absolutely nothing to do with me. But when it is a brand that aligns with my values, of course I will do it. There's no, I'm not that above everything so that I turn that down. But yes, you're right. I don't eat off of Instagram, although it's funny because I may eat from off of Instagram when you think about all the deals that I've actually done with art through the DMs.
Tell me about the launch of your newsletter, The Groove. Like, it basically replaced the blog, right?
Yes. Well, it replaced the blog, but I reproduce it. So because I want to keep the archives available for everybody, I send it out every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then right after, I publish it on the blog so that I can also drive traffic through Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and whatever. So The Groove is 1 year old and it grew to 20,000 emails. And it is so I love it because it's timeless stories about artists, about business people, and it incorporates recent studies in psychology and neuroscience, all aimed at people unleashing or unlocking their best ideas. And I try to make each of the posts and each of the newsletter to read under 5 minutes because I know people are busy and I want to create the maximum amount of impact and let people think through these issues or through these topics that I'm presenting in the least amount of time and get the most benefit out of them. And so I feel super excited about it because I don't have to go running around to just put what's out in the world right now. I know that's interesting. A lot of people want to know about the now, and that's okay. I may at some point add a section under about the now, but for the time being, I am enjoying being able to research things that have a timeless quality. And I think that the world that we live in right now needs a lot of that. If something worked for Jackson Pollock and that same thing worked for Beyonce, why don't we talk about that more often and give people the tools to think through this so that they can apply it to themselves? And then people are going to say, but I'm not Beyonce, but I'm not Jackson Pollock. Of course, nobody is. I'm Maria Brito and I'm not any of those people. But I think we are right now facing a world that requires a lot more independent and critical thinking and creativity than what the world that was 10 years ago, or even the world that was 5 years ago.
And do you have ambitions to turn The Groove into its own standalone media business, or is it just part of your larger content strategy to kind of, raise awareness about you, and then that leads to other business opportunities?
Yes, I don't have a plan for The Groove, to be honest with you. I mentioned to you that I have a book coming up with HarperCollins next spring, and it's really my first 100% text thought leadership book. Because the books before were coffee table books, a different story. And so I think that The Groove is somewhat a supplement or an extension of that, even though nothing that is written in The Groove is in my book because I made a point that nothing that's in the book will be shared, at least not now, in the group. So I like researching these things. I don't know if the group one day will be a book on its own, like, the best of the group and, separate essays and things like that. I don't know what other opportunities will come out of it. For now, I think the project has paid off with dividends in the sense of like the feedback that I get from people and the amount of signups. And I think that's important to me. And I love to connect with people who have the time to read and to reflect. And it's been very rewarding. I mean, you as a content creator and you have your newsletter, you know how cool it is to be able to bring something to people that they didn't know and to just, give them your value and your point of view.
How do you interact with your audience? Like, do you set aside time each week to respond to people replying to the newsletter or commenting on your Instagram?
I'm actually very ADD in that sense. I respond really almost right away to everything that I can. I mean, I'm not 24/7 connected, but if, as soon as I check my email several times a day, and I check my Instagram and the DMs several times a day. So I made a point of being timely and to keep the momentum going in that sense. I don't want people to think that, I didn't answer because I was above the whole thing and whatnot, right? If it takes me a little longer, well, it takes me a little longer. But I just try to be very spontaneous and in the moment. And obviously, social media and these emails take a considerable amount of my day and time because they are important to me. I wouldn't be doing it just for purposes of making myself famous or to have my face out in the world. I think that the purpose of community and getting to know people and interact with them, and if they're following you and giving you a comment and asking a question and giving you their time and attention, that means that you matter to them as well. So it's almost like, for me, an ethical thing to be able to connect with them in this different types of interactions through technology.
How much time do you spend each week creating content?
Okay, the newsletter alone, between research and writing it and polishing and finding the pictures and whatnot, it could be maybe 2 or 3 hours. With Instagram, remember that it's also a part of like my daily life that I have to, on behalf of my clients, go and see these exhibitions. So a lot of what I post is the exhibitions that I saw in galleries or in museums, and that's just taking a picture because I'm in the place where the things are happening. And so that doesn't take as much time, but it takes the time to write a nice caption, edit the picture, and upload it. So if you were to, if I do 7 posts a week, let's say, then you may want to add another 3 hours to that, I'll say, and answering and this and that. If I am cutting reels and that takes so much time, then maybe add another hour to that. So, altogether maybe is 10 hours.
Are you hiring any staff to help you with content production?
No, because it's so mine. I mean, I have people who work for me, but they don't touch my content because, it's like a reflection of me and who I am and what I do. So I do have a photographer, a videographer who's worked for me for ages, and he's been with me for almost 10 years now. And he is able to capture certain images when I'm in the picture. And he's also a person who I have trusted with video for a long time. So he works with me. But
so you'll bring him to a gallery?
I don't bring him that much anymore because sometimes I just take pictures of the artwork alone and I don't have to be in the picture. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes my son comes with me on a weekend and he takes a picture of me and that's it. I don't really need anything that special. But video is a very different animal. And I think I mentioned to you that I was able to turn some of my videos into a TV show. So videos are definitely a whole other thing, especially if I'm in the video, because, I'm not going to be filming myself with a selfie stick. That's not happening. So I have somebody who does that for me, but everything that is captions or writing or whatever, that also me, and editing is all on me as well.
So you mentioned the PBS show, you mentioned the book deal. How much do you really want to move into traditional media versus just having 100% flexibility to create your own media?
I think for the longest time, I thought I wanted to create my own media company. But I think that the problems I have already are enough, and the responsibilities with my business are sufficient that I'm not sure I want to go into a media company as well, because it'll be a whole other host of issues and managing people and doing other things. I do believe that there is a space for both everything that is digital and everything that is, more traditional. When the PBS show came, it was both on regular TV, but it was also streaming through a platform that PBS funded called All Arts TV. Even though it was on all the PBS, and it was in all the PBS websites around the country, because PBS is a state-by-state station. So I book deals. Well, I mean, there will be an audiobook, an ebook, and a hardcover book. So it definitely, all the big publishing houses know that they need to be on all those spaces. So I think I believe in things that are important. I think books are very important still. I love books myself. I love a person who comes with their own thoughts, things that teach me or entertainment or entertain me, or anything that actually gives me a piece of information that I was not aware of before. So I do love that. But I think that the world really is very focused on the production of content and quality content. And there is a lot of crap out there too. So for us who are not into crap, I think we have a responsibility to leave this world in a better place and to put our best ideas out there with generosity. And that's what I do in the newsletter. And that's what I did in the TV shows. And that's what I do on my posts, right? I mean, I know that a lot of people are piggybacking from the information that I'm posting about all these young artists, and they are looking for them and not giving me credit, because it's not possible, right? They are going and they are buying them and they are like flipping them and whatever when they find them really young. And you know what? Who cares? I'm making money. I have a lot of clients. I'm doing really well. And I'm just doing it with generosity. It's for free. I'm not going to go and charge anybody for content. I mean, the book, yes. The course, yes. But the newsletter will remain free. And, I'm not going to go in any sort of like paid wall or anything like that. So I feel very, very, very confident about the idea of merging, digital and social media and traditional content in my strategy.
So I usually interview one of two different kinds of people on this podcast. One is, someone who's very focused on their personal brand and building the business around there. And then the other kind of person is someone who thinks like, I need to extricate my personal brand from this and build a standalone media company in case I could just, so I can hire people and even walk away, or, sell it for a bunch of money to a larger media company or something like that. When you think about like the next several years of growing your business, what are your ambitions? Like, do you eventually want to build anything that's like a little bit, that works on its own without your personal brand having to be woven into every part of it? Or do you really just like being like a very personality driven business?
That's an excellent question, because I feel that I'm on both. In a way, I feel like I would love to build something that I could separate myself from at some point. But at the same time, I enjoy working so much. And I'm so dedicated to my craft and what I do with my clients and how I build my business that I feel it would be a little bit complicated for me to separate myself from the day-to-day and the operations and from having a hand on everything, right? And that's what you do when you build a big business, that you let go of all those things. But I think there are combinations, and I think one of the best examples is Gwyneth and Goop. I mean, it's a really big business, but it still it revolves around her persona a lot. And I think that at some point, obviously, she would want the company to go public or something. And I don't know how much longer, right? But I think from what I gather that she's told me, she wants the business to grow really big, and to serve a lot of people and employ a lot of people. And, when she's really old, then people might not even remember who the owner was, if that makes sense. But for now, she's still beautiful. She's still on. She's the CEO of the company. She's the face of the company, and she's got her hand on everything because she's curious, she's smart, and she's driven, and she wants that to happen. So she's an example that for me not only is an inspiration, but also a person who has been able to capitalize on the best of both worlds, building something big and at the same time being a part of it.
Mm-hmm. And you've been able to build your business until you said a 7-figure business?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And most of it is through the consulting with companies and the commissions with private clients because, as I grew in the business and I got older in the business, I was able not only to do more transactions, but nowadays all of these transactions happen via WhatsApp or they happen on email or text. So I can do a really big volume of transactions most days without necessarily even leaving my house. And also the artworks have gotten more expensive because I've gotten also clients who have moved on from certain, younger artists and decided to acquire things that were more expensive, like mid-career or blue chip. And so it's not necessarily that difficult once you've gotten to the level that I've gotten in my business and the amount of years and expertise that I have to have a 7-figure business based on commissions in the art world. It's actually very common.
Yeah, and that allows you to scale in a way that a lot of other services companies can't, in the sense of like if you're doing public relations, there's only so much you can charge, a monthly retainer, whereas like as you get more advanced, you get access to bigger and bigger deals, which are bigger, which cost a lot more, which then gives you a higher earnings through commission.
Yes, and also it has to do with clients being sufficiently sophisticated to be able to pull the trigger by just seeing an image on a phone, right? I mean, they trust me. They know that I think that's a good option and viable for them. And just by me sending that flat image, it's already saving me so much time. And also the overhead that I have is very small because, yes, I have my assistant and I have Peter, who's the photographer, and I do work with a variety of different consultants for whatever it is that I need at any given time. Like I hired the wonderful Josh Spector, who actually made the introduction with you because I wanted help with refining the message of my newsletter. And he's amazing and wonderful. And I just needed him for whatever it was, 2 months, and that's it, right? So my overhead is very small compared to someone who has to be paying salaries and have, a space and a physical office and, insurance and whatever. I think that I learned how to run this business in a way that is very nimble, thank God. And I'm very cautious too of what kind of extra services I get. I mean, there are things that merit, like launching a book. Of course, I will have to hire a PR agency and things like that. But in the greater scheme of things, I have just gotten better at what I do faster. My clients have also gotten faster and more sophisticated. They don't need to go in person anywhere. And especially during the pandemic, it was a reprieve for them to be able to see all this art online and have me do all the negotiations, arrange for the shippings, and just like, that's it,
Mm-hmm. How much of your business model also is like, are you growing your own personal art collection?
I do have an art collection, and I've grown it a lot. I don't think I can buy a lot more anymore because my husband does not believe in having a storage, and we have a lot of things covering our walls. So I buy when I can or when I feel like I need more. In the past year, I feel that I've had enough and that I don't really need to keep buying things because it could be a disease, right? Like you buy more and you buy more. And I just have a couple of things that are not hanging right now because I don't really have a lot of space anymore. As I said, even though I have a 3-bedroom apartment, I don't have space. But yes, I put money into artists that I discovered or they were working with galleries that I love, and those galleries support emerging artists. And in turn, I supported the galleries. And I mean, the returns are astounding. I've bought artists I paid $5,000 for 2 paintings, and they are $250,000 at auction right now.
Wow. All right, Maria, those were all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
Well, come to my website, mariabrito.com. That's Brito. And there is a link there to subscribe to the newsletter. There are all these thumbnails that take people to my Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, I would love for you to come and hang out with me on Instagram, because that's where I spend the most time and where I put the best content. But also, the newsletter is really awesome. I hope people enjoy it, and people who want to think differently and people who want to just like have a moment to borrow this content for themselves and apply it to their lives. I think there is a lot of value there.
Okay, Maria, well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
No, thank you. It was a lot of fun, and your questions were super sharp, and I appreciate all the due diligence you did. And it's an amazing opportunity for me to connect with you and your audience.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast. So if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.